Hi, I'm Crystal Keating. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Johnny and Friends Ministry Podcast. Each week, we're hearing hopeful stories of people impacted by disability and answering your questions about how to welcome families with special needs in your church and community. You can find all our episodes and resources mentioned on the podcast at johnnyandfriends.org/podcast. Now, we know that disability impacts the entire family, but sometimes we can miss the impact that it has on the sibling of a brother or sister with special needs. Well, today we have the opportunity to hear from two typical siblings about their family dynamics.
It's a normal brother-sister relationship. Yes, there's challenges. Yes, there's difficulties. Yes, there's hard days, but there's also some really good days. At the end of the day, it's like, you're my brother, you're my sister. I love you.
Listen now as Dennis Spivey and Jessica Johnson share what you should know about siblings of a brother or sister with special needs and the joys and the challenges that have shaped them. Today we'll be talking about the impact disability has on the whole family, including the siblings of brothers and sisters with special needs. To speak personally on this topic, I'm excited to have Dennis Spivey and Jessica Johnson with me in the studio today. Welcome to the podcast, Dennis and Jessica.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Oh, I'm so happy to meet both of you. And, as we're talking, I can feel the excitement in this room. I know that, when we talk about families impacted by disability, we often can miss the siblings. And I'm so glad that both of you are here to speak personally about that. So, Jessica, where did you grow up and how many siblings were in your family?
Yeah, so I grew up in Orange County, Fullerton, and I only have one brother. He is 25 years old. He has Down syndrome and his name's Trevor. So it's just the two of us. And we grew up in the same house. They still live in the same house I was born in. Just the four of us. Yeah.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Dennis, what about you?
Yeah, I grew up in Long Beach. I'm, I think, second or third generation. My parents grew up there and grandparents also lived there. I am one of two children. My older sister, Emily, is 40. My sister has a condition called microcephaly, which quite literally means small head. Okay. And it's a condition that they're not really quite sure where it stems from. There's an abnormality in the brain growth in utero that transfers up as they continue to grow and causes a wide range of cognitive and physical delays. My sister, I would say, is on the higher functioning end of that spectrum. She's amazing. She's funny. She's energetic. She's super social. She knows everybody. She's a bit of a celebrity in Long Beach, I would say. You can't go anywhere without someone coming up and giving her a hug and saying, hey, Em. So she's a blessing. It was just the four of us. She does live on her own. She lives with another friend who also has some disabilities. But yeah, cool. She's an amazing person.
She sounds like it. And Jessica, you were telling me about your brother Trevor that he also works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he works under the umbrella of Goodwill Industries.
Okay.
And they've been locating him in jobs nearby. So he actually just got promoted to work at Goodwill.
Trevor.
Yeah, the one across the street from our house. So super close. He loves it. And so a job coach picks him up from the house along with about 3 other people. They go around town picking everybody up. Then they go to their job.
So neat.
Yeah, it's the coolest thing. And he loves it. He loves the people he gets to work with. He meets all of his new friends. He gets to see old friends when they meet up on Fridays. It's awesome. And so he does a lot of sorting at Goodwill. That's his new job. It's awesome.
That's a blessing.
Yeah.
Dennis, talk about your relationship with your sister while you were growing up. Were you guys close?
Sure. Yeah, I think we had somewhat of a typical relationship of any brother and sister growing up. And then obviously we had some differences, but we fought a lot, just like normal brothers and sisters do. And with her condition, it was not necessarily until probably kindergarten, first grade that it became more apparent that her delays were above and beyond. We had a good relationship. Very, like I said, there was a lot of bickering and our rooms were right down the hall from each other, so I heard her music blasting nonstop. She was a huge New Kids on the Block fan.
Oh man,
love it!
I grew up to Step by Step and Hanging Tough for on a loop for probably like 7 straight years, I would say.
That's amazing.
Jessica, what about you? Did you have New Kids on the Block?
Not
down
New
the
Kids on
hallway
the Block,
from you?
but High School Musical on
yes.
repeat, all 3, all the time.
That's some good music.
Yes, great music. Any Disney Channel movie, he has the soundtrack to it, and he's listening to it all the time. If it's not in his room, it's on the front porch, and he has it blasting, and the whole neighborhood can hear. Or he's on the driveway dancing, doing like the choreographed dance moves that go along with all the High School Musical songs. It's like to the point where the whole neighborhood like knew Trevor had his routine of whenever he comes home from school, he's on the driveway or swinging on the front porch swing.
That would make great neighbors, like you kind of draw a community around
absolutely. You. Yeah, they all know and love Trevor, and it was a really cool. He bridged a lot of people together in our neighborhood, that's for sure.
Well, what kind of things did you guys enjoy doing as a family together?
We grew up camping a lot as a family, and Trevor loved it. We were limited in how long our trips could be and what we can do on those trips, but once we kind of found a good groove, we would go to like the same places regularly. Just Trevor loves routine, and I love routine too. We all love it. Yep. So we would go up to the Eastern Sierra Nevada mountains a lot as a family every summer, and we would all really enjoy that. Trevor loves to fish and enjoy the boat. So does my dad and I and my mom. We love like Disneyland. Disneyland's great. I love Disneyland. I mean, come on. Yeah. Yeah, just like being together as a family, whether we're just hanging out on the front porch, being together. We're all about just like being present. We don't have to do like the big extravagant things in order to have fun together. I think we all just find comfort in just being in the same place together.
That sounds like a fabulous family.
Yeah, they're pretty great.
She has a great family. I can attest firsthand.
That's awesome. Okay, well, we're talking about families impacted by disability. What were some of the challenges that your families have faced because of Trevor's Down syndrome and Emily's microcephaly?
There's definitely some differences in some challenges. My sister, like I mentioned earlier, was on the higher functioning. So when we were kids, we did the same thing. My dad was a school principal for 40-something years, and so he had the summers off, and we kind of had we kind of had our same hotels that we went to kind of locally to Southern California every summer. And
it sounds like routine is important.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. And I don't remember when we were kids, Emily's disability affecting that really at all. As she's gotten older, she's developed some seizure disability things that are correlated with what she has. So I think now that plays a little bit more into what she can and can't do in terms of trips. When we were a kid, I don't remember being challenged to do anything vacation-wise or fun in that nature.
I think the first thing that comes to mind is just medically. Trevor is prone to having like ear infections and stuff like that. So
is that common with people with Down syndrome?
Yes, it's not one of the main symptoms. Okay. It's not the most popular, but their sinuses tend to be a little bit smaller or easily stuffed up, I guess you can say. And so that's the first thing that comes to mind when I talk about like when you bring up challenges and when the routine is off a little bit, whether he's like not washing his hands as regularly or not being as clean as normal, like that is definitely more common to see the ear infections or something kind of happen. But I'd say that's like the only challenge that we faced as a family concerning Trev.
So I'm curious to know, is Trevor aware of his Down syndrome?
That's a good question. I don't know, to be honest with you. I remember when I got my driver's license, he kind of responded with this, "Oh, I want to drive." And Emily kind of did the same thing,
huh? Experience with my sister, correct?
Yeah. So we never really had, I think he knows he can't drive, or he does know that now, because I've had my driver's license for a while, I think. And same thing when I got married. It's like, oh, well, I want a girlfriend because I want to get married. And
right.
But I don't know if he knows, I know he's heard Down syndrome. We've gone to Down syndrome events. He knows that. And so I'm sure he does know that he has it, but it's never been this sit down talk of Trevor, you have Down syndrome,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, same with me. It was, it's I think you nailed it on the head. I think she's aware of some of the things she can't do or hasn't done, like driving and getting married. But, she's a happy-go-lucky person. And, I don't know that it's something that weighs on her trying to figure out why she can't do things as much as just knowing she can't do certain things or hasn't done certain things.
Yeah.
So it's not like, I'm picturing someone who's really aware of what they're quote unquote missing out on in life and comparing themselves. I mean, we do that all the time, right? That's our temptation. And so I would think as someone in your sibling situation where they don't have as much awareness, I think there's a freedom to that. There's a grace of God where, okay, I cannot do that, but I'm happy in my life. I love to hear that they are, that your sister's a rock star and everybody knows her. I mean, community is what we long for.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. And I think what's cool is there are like the Down Syndrome Association has like provided events where Trevor like can go to dances and he did that in high school anyways. So, I mean, he was still able to like be a part of like those kind of things. He was able to like have his community and get to know people and people know him and feel seen and known and see others and know others. And so I think that has definitely helped with that feeling of normalcy and feeling like he's not missing out because he like did go to school. He did like make friends and does still make friends at his new job. So I don't think he feels like he's missing out on.
He has the important parts of life. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm curious to know, what about their spiritual lives? Is there any kind of spiritual sensitivities for them? Have you seen them have an interest in God? What's that like for
we
Trevor
grew
and
up going to church. My dad was a minister. We went to a small church and there was 3 sort of main pastor ministers, and he was one of them. So she was in and around the church, participated and grew up the same way, any kid would grow up in the church. There's certainly some level of comprehension that, and I don't know if I know the answer to the question of how deep is her comprehension of spirituality or faith, really. But you see faith and you see spirituality in her life. And so...
Like in what ways?
I think just her love for people, the way she interacts with people, it's she really is like a tangible expression of God's love, the way she interacts and talks with other people. So I don't know that I've spent too much time trying to figure out what level of understanding does she have and does it matter? No, I don't think so. I see God in her life every time I see her.
Yeah. I think alongside that, Trevor is the most joyful person I know, hands down. I just remember his, when he had a big ear surgery, he just like came out of the surgery room with this massive smile on his face. It's like, how? Like, how? Yeah. Like, there's no explanation besides the grace of God. Like, absolutely not. And when you meet him, like, you can't help but smile. There's just like, it just radiates out of him. And yeah, he like loves people well. People love him well. I remember one Easter in particular, he really grasped on to like Jesus died. And I remember that like rocked his world for a good 2 days. Like so it's like he totally knows, like he like knows the gospel, but I just remember that really like bothered or just like he was just really wrestling with that for the first time. He totally took it to heart to the point where he just kind of sat in his room and just was like, you could just tell like processing all of it. And I remember kind of coming in and him just first thing out of his mouth, like, Jesus died. We're like, yeah, but he rose again. Yes. And that's why we can have hope and like rejoice in the grace of God. Totally. And he was like, okay. It's just kind of cool seeing those wheels kind of turn and him to really like grasp like why, like what is this church thing about, Like what is this? Yeah.
Why is everyone celebrating Easter? Because he died? No, because he's living.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
and I would say, I would add, Jess and I both have, I would say, higher functioning special needs siblings. And you see the other side of the spectrum where you have nonverbal siblings, you have very physically disabled, can't really have conversations. And I would say the same is true. There's never like a better picture of God's love than a buddy break where you have 50 kids with special needs and 50 volunteers just interacting, and the love that's going both ways is really unbelievable.
I love that picture. And would we all be like people who show God's love to others and
Right.
represent that we are his because of our joy.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Okay, well, what about when you guys were growing up? Do you think your outlook on life was different from your peers?
Yeah, I would say so. I think it's easier to look back now and see some of the impact of being around that community and having a sister with special needs. But when you're sort of in it, I don't know that you're really cognizant of some
Right.
major thing that's happening inside of you,
Yeah,
or that's
this is your
becoming a
life.
part of you, or that's going to shape who you eventually.
Right.
You're sort of just living.
You're living it. Yeah.
But looking back, for me at least, it's really easy to see the impact of my sister M's life on my life. And, what's really cool is to go even full circle and see that impact now, that because we're so involved with special needs. And, I got involved because of my sister at Calvary, and then we were in and around it. And so that was the connection. And to see my kids, to come full circle and see my kids now interact with and be around. My son Dominic's 8 and my daughter Peyton is 11. And my daughter Peyton's been coming to buddy break with me for like 6 or 7 years, since she was like 4 or 5 years old.
Cool.
Is she a buddy?
She's a buddy. She's one of the best buddies that we have. But, to kind of go back to your question, the impact of growing up with a sibling that has special needs, to see it now, it's really powerful.
Yeah, I completely echo everything you're saying. I would say Trevor is the person who has influenced me the most
Really?
in my life. Absolutely. Because he opened my eyes to people affected by disability. And because of that, I'm choosing to pursue career choices that I probably wouldn't have had exposure to had he not been my brother. And I'm involved in volunteering experiences that I probably wouldn't be involved in if it wasn't for Trevor. There's just so many things in my life where it's like I wouldn't be led to these things had I not known him. And so because of that, I'm thankful. But then besides just where I'm being led in my life, I think he's shaped a lot of like my character and shown me like how to be joyful when things are hard, shown me how to be
Patience
patient.
and,
When things aren't going your way or when things are
Perspective in a lot of
frustrating.
ways, yeah.
Absolutely. It's like I wouldn't understand that or had seen that modeled so well through him to be able to receive that myself. And because of that, very similarly, like we had all of our friends, I think, wouldn't have been exposed to have a compassionate heart had they not known Trevor, because he has such a compassionate heart. We
The
had
ripple effects.
Yeah, the ripple effects are amazing. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's important, especially for the kids who are siblings of maybe more
Profound disability.
Yeah,
Sure.
where it feels in the moment like I can definitely feel how this is affecting my life, maybe more so than Jess and I. But it's sort of the forest through the trees, and it's sometimes and I get the ability, and I'm blessed to be able to talk with some of the siblings at Calvary and hear stories from the siblings of the more profoundly disabled kids. And there are more tangible challenges, I think, that some face more than others, just depending on what disability you're dealing with. But I think it's important to know, again, for me, looking back to see how it shaped my life, like everything is sort of happening for a reason, and it's all coming from God above. And so it's important to be patient and understand that, your life will be blessed in some way, shape, or form, and you will be positively impacted in your life because of your sibling. So I think sometimes it's hard to see that when you're 13 years old and you have a sibling who's medically challenged, and you're always going to these doctor visits, and you can't go to this and they can't do this camp because something's going on with your brother and sister, where there's a more tangible time commitment for that sibling. But that sibling may end up with something even more beautiful than I've experienced on the tail end, as they develop and shape and become individuals and grow up.
Yeah, and you and I are also like not living with our siblings now, so I think it's easier for us to kind of look back and have a clearer understanding of what all that was for. And the people who are like in it now, I remember being in it and not understanding why we had to go to the doctor's office and not my softball game or whatever it is. So it's so much easier looking back and having clarity than when you're in it and having a clear understanding of what's going on.
That's really insightful. As you guys talk about your involvement with families affected by disability, especially working with the siblings, I'm really interested to know, and I think those who are listening would also find it helpful to talk about families impacted by disability. Have the siblings that you work with ever expressed any disadvantages of having a brother or sister with special needs?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, when you talk about profound disabilities and the medical appointments, what's happening in a family system?
I've had the chance to sit down with some of the older kids. I think when you're talking to a 5th grader or a 6th grader and you kind of say, hey, is it ever hard? You know, you kind of get the yes, no's. Yeah, kind of, maybe. You don't really get a deep answer. But I've had the chance to sit down with some of the high school age kids and sort of share my experience and hear theirs. And, you hear a lot of, I don't want to burden my parents anymore than they already are, which is tough because maybe there's something that they're going through or they just feel like they have to do everything perfectly so that they're not creating burden that's not there. Yeah. And then you hear, there's a lot of, I just wish I could play football, play catch with my brother kind of thing. What would it be like if I could go out in the backyard and play baseball with my brother and I don't get the opportunity to do that? So you see firsthand some of the, again, challenges that shape you. Now, I hate saying that these are, I hate wanting to make it a sob story or to make it a, something that's just so tragic. But there are real challenges, and I think it's important. And one of the reasons that Jess and I have kind of started this sibling group at Calvary is we want them to be able to get together and be with people who sort of just get it.
Yeah.
That's really the best way I can describe it, is they're going through similar circumstances and they just get it.
Yeah.
And it's nice to have an outlet. And even if the conversation's not even about my sister or my brother or what challenges are we facing, there's a community, I think, that exists. And we had an event recently. We had 20. It was our first sort of sibling event. We just were around these siblings, and Jess and I said, hey, let's do something for just the siblings. I mean, there's so much stuff. We do Buddy Break for their special needs brothers and sisters, but what can we do to celebrate them and then just create community and friendships? And so we sent out an email, and I mean, it wasn't minutes later we were getting responses.
Yeah, so good.
Which was really cool.
You hit a nerve.
We hit a nerve for sure. And the parents were so excited and the kids were so excited. And we had, I think, 25 or 30 kids.
A lot. Yeah.
Show up on our first,
hey,
let's go bowling. Yeah. And then we came back to our house and just hung out. And these kids were running around the backyard.
So
the older kids were kind of grouping together and kind of doing their cell phone. Yeah. I don't know, what are they, Snapchat or whatever they're doing these days. But they've created friendships, and I know some of them are still talking and have communicated since. And I think that was the whole goal of that, not to be a sob story. Let's do our life story.
It's not a support group.
It's not a support
you guys
group.
Made
and
that
I even
clear.
said that in the emails, like, not a support group. But it kind of is in a way, like an organic way. It's a way for them to be
support group.
But the intention is not like, hey, come share your testimony and then let's go through it and how can we help each other, and step by step. It was let's just hang out and have fun and create friendships, and it really worked.
Love that.
So I was talking with this one family, and I heard that at the support group, their girls felt a little more free to just be themselves. I feel like a lot of the times when they're with their sibling who's affected by disability, they kind of have to watch how they act, watch what they say a lot, because their sibling would mimic and copy or do something. So they're always kind of like watching themselves. And they said that the sibling group was a really cool outlet so that they could just like be goofy and like kind of like push each other and like be sisters and just kind of be goofy without those watching eyes.
And like have 3 pieces of candy or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I noticed that as well.
Do it. Yeah, lots of
before
food.
dinner kind of thing.
So they're always conscientious of thinking, what is my brother or sister watching me do?
Yeah.
Are they going to imitate me?
Right.
Am I going to have candy and they're not going to be able to have some, and that's going to create a thing?
I think there is an indirect pressure. I mean, I remember like thinking back to just my personal experience also, and just being very conscientious of like what I do, and not because it's like if I did something wrong, then like Trevor would do that too. But it was just like this kind of awareness that like, okay, like, yes, I'm the younger sibling, but sometimes I kind of have to act like the older sibling and model so that he would follow that example. Yeah. And I think that that's a pretty common thread that a few siblings feel.
Yeah, and I can recall some of the bickering and fighting when we were kids, and I can remember my parents saying, you have to be the adult in the fight. You have to be the one to diffuse it and things like that. And that was fine, and that was totally true. But I think that's just some of the other things I think these kids think about a lot is like, I can't just bicker with my sister and it be an even, who's at fault, she was or he was. It's you have to think a little bit deeper about the situation and know that the resolution likely has to come from you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is hard for, it can be hard for an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old kid to try and process through why they have to always be the one to take the upper road.
Yeah.
For lack of a better term. But again, all just differences and things that siblings experience and somebody who doesn't have a sibling with special needs.
Yeah.
Now, you guys are both married. And, when you think about the future, do you ever think, man, what role am I going to play as far as taking care of my brother or my sister? Is that on your radar? Has it always been on your radar?
I think it's always been on my radar. Trevor's always lived with my parents, and he loves living with my parents. If he were to ever express that he would want to live elsewhere with someone else, then they would obviously listen and take that into consideration. But he's never expressed that.
Okay.
And so as of right now, that's home. But yeah, absolutely. It's like, okay, what do we happen when that day comes where it's a little more difficult for mom and dad to care for Trevor and it's a little more tiring? When my husband asked my dad for my hand in marriage, that was a topic of, would you be okay having Trevor someday? Like, that's always just been like, yeah, of course I'd have Trevor someday. There was no question. And I wanted that. Like, I wouldn't want him to... I would want him. It's just as simple as that. And
you want him to be with you and your family.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that was a big question, and we're on board, and that's the plan. When will that happen? Have no idea.
Yeah.
And what, like, how, when, where, don't know. But yeah, absolutely, we'll have Trev someday, and I'm excited about that. I'll love having my brother down the hallway again.
That's awesome.
Yeah, same with me, and I'm just a handful of years older than Jess here, but it's a real topic for parents too. I mean, even if there's an obvious, the sibling lives close by, it seems like the situation is suitable for my child with special needs to move in, and people have said, yeah, of course, just like Jess just said, my parents still worry. They just, there's this unknown, and obviously I did what Jess said. Emily could live with us, and if that's ultimately what is best for her, then that's what will happen. Right. But it's a real thing that parents think about nonstop.
I bet.
And I think maybe earlier on, when I was a younger adult, not that you're trying to figure out where you're going to live and which house you're going to buy based on that, but I think it matters. I mean, you think about it, and now I don't think about it as much. It's just kind of no big deal. We'll figure it out. But I can see and I can understand why some siblings would be stressful at some points of their life. If I'm in college and, hey, I got this opportunity on the East Coast to go work, but my sibling lives with my parents on the West Coast. Should I do this? And that's not something I ever had to deal with, but I could see that being a real tough situation to have to think through. Yeah.
Or if you and I said our siblings are pretty high functioning, how would the severity of the disability affect that decision? I'm sure there's a lot of factors that would come into play.
Absolutely.
There. Yeah.
Well, I have to read what you wrote, as you were describing, Dennis, something about the siblings that you have met. You said they are an amazing breed of people. I obviously was one myself and know firsthand of the different experiences they face in having a sibling with special needs. And this is where I think it really ties into what you're saying. Siblings often make time sacrifices. Whether it's being shuttled around to doctor's appointments or some necessary function, there's a time commitment that comes along with it. There are definitely challenges for a sibling that other kids don't recognize or have to deal with themselves. And I just think it's that aspect of, you guys are amazing people in that you're giving your life for your families, for Trevor and for Emily, but you do it with love. And I think that's where God is really displayed in how you love on your family.
Absolutely. And what a blessing to be able to love on your family that way, in sort of a reverse, sort of strange way. It's a blessing to not be forced to, but get to do that type of stuff and just know that that's what's going to happen and be excited and blessed by it.
Right. It's awesome.
Well, this podcast really tries to answer real questions with real stories, especially when it comes to welcoming and including people with disabilities in the church. So I pose this question to both of you. What do siblings want their friends, church family, and community to know about them and their relationship with their brother or sister with a disability? How can churches better welcome and embrace people with disabilities?
It's tough. I mean, so the broader topic of starting a special needs ministry at a church is a difficult one. And at Calvary, my wife and has done an amazing job. I love her very much.
We love your wife.
Got to make sure I get that in there. But, the executive team and the elders and, the head pastor, everybody from the top down was on board with it and have supported it. And it's tough because there are awkward moments. There are kids running through your lobby screaming during service. And you have to be able to get through that initial shock factor and get everybody on board, because once you do, it grows like wildfire. And the ministry at Calvary right now is literally on fire. It's growing. There are new kids there every buddy break. There are new kids there every Sunday. And once you get past that initial phase, it blesses everybody involved. And I mentioned earlier, just watching 50 volunteers interact with 50 kids with special needs. And it's amazing how the situation sort of flips, and you come in and you're a little bit concerned. I don't know if I can help these kids. I've never done it before, and I got to help them. I got to make sure they can, have their snack and all this stuff. And you leave realizing how much those kids have helped you.
Yes, right.
It's crazy. So to answer your question, how can a church get involved? I think you have to start a special needs ministry, and then the byproduct of that is these amazing siblings that you get to meet and that start showing up. And I can't tell you how many siblings that we have at Calvary that volunteer their time and work with other kids that have special needs at a buddy break and help out on top of everything that they go through. And that's a real blessing to see too. But these siblings are real people. I think to answer your question, what would they want you to know is I have challenges, and it would be silly to say it's not difficult at times and different, but we're normal kids. We love to have normal fun things and do normal fun things. And, the more support around a special needs ministry that you can do and include them, I think the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing too that siblings would want us all to know is that they have a normal brotherly, sisterly love that they have. Sure. It's a normal brother-sister relationship. Yes, there's challenges. Yes, there's difficulties. Yes, there's hard days, but there's also some really good days. Those small milestones become victories. And so it's yes, that's true. But at the end of the day, it's you're my brother, you're my sister. I love you. And I think there's even a grace of it's easier to forgive, I'd say. And they're brother and sister. They still fight over the TV remote and who's picking the channel to watch. But at the end of the day, there's this understanding of, we're in this together.
We're family.
We're a family. Absolutely.
Totally.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, you guys, thank you so much for coming on here. I really have learned a lot, and I know our listeners have as well. Thank you for expressing just the normalcy that families can have, even when there's disability involved, and to take each person as an individual and to love them with the love of Christ. You guys are awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
I loved today's insightful conversation about siblings. What an encouragement to hear from Dennis and Jessica. And if you're a typical sibling, know that your challenges are shaping you. Your life will be blessed and positively impacted because of your sibling. All this week at Johnny and Friends, we have been talking about siblings, hearing their stories from different perspectives. And if you'd like a teenager's perspective on being a sibling of a sister with Down syndrome, visit Johnny and Friends on Facebook or at johnnyandfriends.org/podcast to see their story. Thank you for listening. You won't want to miss next week when I chat with Tobias Haglin from Young Life Capernaum. We'll talk about sharing the gospel with teens and young adults living with disability. Communicating the love of Jesus and the gospel of Christ to students with special needs goes far beyond what we say. You will be so blessed by hearing his insights from 10 years of ministry. Once again, thank you for listening. You can subscribe to the podcast on any of your favorite podcasting apps. And you can find all of our episodes and resources mentioned on the podcast at johnnyandfriends.org/podcast. I'm Crystal Keating on the Johnny and Friends Ministry Podcast.